just get the situation situated. Namaste. Oh, lovely Hollowbone Hawk. I was about to just send you a message. In fact, I was just sending you now. I see I missed a call from you. I must have been on the other side of the house. Big love. Namaste to people that are going to be joining the conversation retrospectively. I think this is a conversation to be having. I don't know those who saw the article that I wrote on Substack, but that's really the inspiration behind this little talk. And I thought I'd just bang this out there. It's not my usual time that I'm on, so I don't know if many of my usual people will be here. But anyway, I figured let's just do it. It was supposed to be on at 7 p.m., but time didn't work out for me so well earlier. By the time I realized it was time to go on, it was like really, really late. Namaste, how are you doing? I hope you're well. Who have we got here? Spilja, Espilja. Welcome, aloha. I hope you're good. I take it you're coming from Hawaii with the aloha. Makes me think of Vincent. He's off in Hawaii as well. Big love. Live on YouTube now. Okay, good to know. Yeah, it was originally 7 p.m. in my time zone, which was 6 p.m. GMT +1. And then I missed it. I was with my boy and we overshot it. It was like 20 past 7. I was like, dang, I've still got things to do. I can't jump on live now. I thought it was about 22. When you've got a 9-year-old and you're hanging out with him, time just warps. So anyway, yeah, the topic is really, really cool. I think it's a fundamentally important topic. And, it's one of those things that people aren't really talking about. And I thought, this is really an important discussion. Shalom. Namaste. How are you doing, Vincent? I was just talking about you. We got another Hawaiian lady here who was saying aloha. And I was like, oh, that's the Vincent place. Hawaii. I'd love to go to Hawaii. It seems like a really nice place. The people there seem pretty cool, pretty laid back, pretty chilled. Makes me think of Africa in a way. So yeah, the dangers of the false Enneagram geometry. This is something that's been on my mind. It's been in my heart. It's been flaming up for a while. I see a few people starting to arrive. There's 13 people. There are 2 different chat rooms, by the way, people. So I can tell you now that the people that are chatting in that screen, right? The cinema screen mode. I'm also in the vertical phone mode. Apparently the cinema mode works better on mobile phones, tablets. So check me if I'm wrong. This is what I've been told. Big love. Namaste. How you doing, Bradley? Hope you're good. Hope you're well. Hope you're thriving. Yeah, so this whole story with the sacred geometry, I really wanted to tackle this. I wanted to tackle this like proper, like tackled. Let's just say I wanted this thing tackled. And in order to really get right down to it, I want us to take a look. Let me get one of them fake enneagrams on the screen for you. We got to take a look at the fake enneagram to see just how it is that it's just fake and full of spam. Let's call it the spamgram. The spamgram. Oh, that's brilliant. I think I've just renamed this the spamgram. Ooh, that's got it's got a swear word in the center of, I don't want to advertise some random, stupid, mindless company. Sorry, but that's how I feel, man. Don't want to advertise some random company here to you guys. That's very low resolution. I'm sure I can find a better resolution. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do just fine. Never mind all the numbers going around. Do you find the perfect enneagram to use? That's the one. Okay, now this gives us the perfect to go ahead with. Let me just Image it, got the image is there, good, and share the image. So I'm going to talk about this what I call a swear word. I call this a geometric cuss, right? And I'm going to explain to you exactly why I call this the geometric cuss word. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that you send to someone when you know, when they've really pissed you off. You send them one of these, right? You send it to them, and you write their mother's name on it. Like that's the big insult. And the fact that people are calling this an Enneagram is really, it's a heavy psyop, and people don't understand how nuanced the psyop is. It's so nuanced. I'm going to take a sip of me cocoa. Oh, dang, but that's good. Dark, strong cocoa with that's cashew nut and walnut milk. Very nice combination. 30%, 25 to 30% walnut, the rest cashew nut. I've nailed the perfect raw milk, homemade raw milk for making cacao with. And you don't need to add any honey or sweetener. It's just pure cacao. So, yeah, the image that you see on the screen, people call it an Enneagram. But the first thing I want to bring to your attention, and I want us to really focus on this, right? Because this is being called an Enneagram, but it is clearly, look at it. Let's take a moment. Let's just really look at this image on the screen here. What do we see? I don't see an Enneagram. What I see is a circle, right? And inside that circle, I see a triangle, an equilateral triangle. That's one polygon. Then inside that circle, I see superimposed upon the triangle, I see an irregular hexagram. And I want us to concentrate on those words, an irregular hexagram. You'll notice, and I want us to be clear, that the length of the line between 5 and 8 is much longer than the length of the line between 5 and 7. And we can see the same happening for the length of the line between 4 and 2 and 4 and 1, right? And I think that's quite important. And then we see once again, so there's two different length lines happening here. The lengths of the lines are fundamentally different. And what we have at the bottom here is we have this discrepancy between 5 and 4. This is really, really fundamental for us to recognize. So we cannot call this a polygon because this is not a polygon. This is two separate polygons. We need to be honest about what we're looking at, right? If this was a polygon, then it would be a singular shape, but there's not a singular shape here, right? We've got two separate structures, and the irregular hexagram, the irregular hexagram, if you look at it, it actually doesn't make any sense in terms of symmetry. Yeah, sure, it's got bilateral symmetry, but it doesn't have the continuity of the vertical symmetry. And this creates a real problem, right? The real problem is rather fundamental if we look at it. This means that this structure cannot be part of a wheel. You could not make a wheel like this, right? If you tried to construct a wheel like this, you would have a problem with number 5 and number 4. And the stress between the points of 5 and 4 and 9 would create the buckling in the wheel. The reason you would have that buckling is because the load-bearing capacity would not be, there would be no equity. There would be no equal dispensation of force. And so this structure is not designed to turn. That's the first point. It only works when it's this way up. If we take this image and we invert it, right? We turn it a little bit like a clock. It no longer makes sense, right? Because it suddenly starts to, at the moment, it's almost like it's a house that's balancing on the 5 and the 4. Now, a lot of people don't appreciate the importance of this. And I really want to get into this, right? So there's a circle, there's a triangle, and there's an irregular hexagon. There's another point that I want us to refer to with this, and that's quite important, right? That one cannot inscribe this with continuity. The irregular hexagram can be inscribed with continuity. However, it works back to front. And I want to show you just exactly what the problem with this is, right? So it goes from left. Let's say you start with 5 and you scribe from 5 to 7, from 7 to 1, from 1 to 4, then from 4 to 2, back to 2 to 8, and back from 2 to 5. I want you to understand that what we have here is a linear structure. It goes from one line to the other, and then it comes back to that line again. Now, if you compare this to any other structure that contains movement, then you're going to see that there's something rather fundamentally different. And it's so fundamentally different that I want you to appreciate exactly what it is that we're showing you here. So here's a pentagram, for example. Now, I hope you can see my mouse. If I'm inscribing this pentagram, I go from there to there, to there, to there, to there, to there. Notice that I'm moving in a circle. This is actually really, really important. The movement is in a circle. It's not moving one way and then coming back that way. That suggests that there's one-way traffic to A to B, and then B goes to C, and C has one-way traffic back to A, right? That's not suggesting that there's a continuity of movement, right? And that continuity of movement produces what we call chakra. And this is rather important when we start to recognize just exactly what it is that we're looking at here. So within the sphere of magical work, we use what is called unicursal polygons. And a unicursal polygon, let me give you an example of a unicursal polygon so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, that one will do. So here I'm bringing onto the screen, I hope I am, 2 unicursal polygons. Notice in the center, it's not a unicursal polygon. In the center, it's not an enneagram. What is the center? The center is 3 triangles, right? 3 separate triangles laid over each other. And we have unicursal polygons on the left and on the right. And so what that means is, let's say you start with 1, right? And you go from 1 to 5, 5 to 9, 9 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 3, 3 to 7, 7 to 2, 2 to 6, 6 to 1, 1 to 5. You understand? It goes round in a circle. And you're putting your finger to inscribe at one point, and you're continuing without lifting your finger or your pen. And that means that it's a single line that changes direction 9 times. I'm really getting wound up by this little dog. If you guys could just give me 1 second to just deal with this little dog, I will be a second. Such a loud little dog. Sorry about that. I got this little fella over here. He is such a he's a moody boy, huh? He's moody. Oh, he's so moody. He's just a little bugger. Anyway, that's a little Henry, little Pekingese bugger. So you can see when we're looking at this, now these are true enneagrams. There's two of them. There's one on the left and there's one on the right. And they both represent the continuity of flow. Now, why this is important when it comes to all magical works, and you will find that any true pentagram, hexagram, and I want to point out that what we typically call a hexagram with the two triangles is not a true hexagram. That is technically two triangles that is called a hexagram. So it's, you could think of it as slang term, right? The agram means that there's a continuity, right? And the continuity moves in a circle. That means that there's an infinite potential. That means that you could just infinitely go round and round and round and round and round and end up where you began and just keep going, like the 7 notes in an octave, for example. And so the septagram is based upon this. The seven notes of the octave move around and jumps into the next bandwidth of the same energy. So who we got here? We got Capybara. Why do I think all murders are usually caused by saints? They're bad. Do you have normal knowledge? I'm not sure what you mean. Yeah, exactly, Vincent. Exactly. The structural integrity cannot be compromised. It's continuous. But here's like really what we're looking at, right? From an occult perspective, yeah? We've got 9 equal lengths, 9 lines that are equal. The first point of the first line touches the last point of the last line. And so that means there are 9 equal potentials, all expressed. And they're expressed in a series of gestures that is one endless flow of energy. And the continuity is so perfect that it ends where it begins. Where it ends, it begins. It begins where it ends. Where it ends, it begins. It suggests infinity. And as it suggests infinity, it suggests infinite potential. And as it suggests infinite potential, it suggests that each cycle around will increase the energy. It's like a motor. The motor goes faster and faster and faster. It suggests a kind of acceleration. This is really, really, really important. So these two enneagrams that you can see here, you know, you've got the one with the 20 degree angles on the left, and you've got the one with the 100-degree angles on the right. On the right, you've got 900 degrees. On the left, you've got 180 degrees. So 180 degrees on the left and 900 degrees on the right, right? That's quite important. What happens when, right, you add those two together? I want to show you guys something, all right? You end up with 1080 degrees. Why is that important? There are 1080 names of Shiva in the Shiva Namastra, right? There are 1080 names of Vishnu. There are 1080 sacred names of Brahma. And these are the permutations of the 108 names. So the 108 names are permuted each 100 times to produce 1080 names. And there's a crossover between these names of the Vishnu, the Brahma, and the Shiva. It's really fundamental to understanding the Vedic cosmology and the Vedic structure of being. So the math represented by these two different enneagrams is really fundamentally powerful if you look at what it represents. But going beyond that, going just down to the really, really simple stuff, we have this endless flow of force that represents the will. It represents concentration, an increase of concentration. So when you meditate on an enneagram, what you're meditating on is an increased infinite potential of concentration. Concentration of form, concentration of force, concentration of energy, concentration of awareness, concentration of thought, concentration of power, concentration of knowledge, concentration of wisdom, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, when you look at this, when you look at this insult, and the reason this is an insult, right, is because they call it an enneagram, which when it isn't an enneagram. They should be saying this polygon group. That's technically a polygon group of 2 polygons. It's not a singular polygon. In the same way that the one in the center is a polygon group, not an enneagram. There are 2 enneagrams and a polygon group within these 3 structures. That's why I always suggest that there are only 2 enneagrams. But the polygon group is important because the polygon group brings the structure of 3, the elements of 3, which are the fundamental structuring of the universe, the 3, 6, and the 9 into play. And it shows us the 3 aspects of 3, 6, 9 and how they manifest in the world and how the relationships of the other 2 enneagrams, the yang and the yin enneagram, are in a state of balance between these 3 sacred principles. In the Kabbalah, they would be called the 3 mother letters, the three mother forms. In Taoism and Chinese forms of alchemy, they would be called the Shen, the Qi, and the Jing, right? In Western cosmological occult circles, it would be called the astral body, the etheric body, and the causal body, for example, right? And so we always have these 3 fundamental principles. It's the Ka, the Ba, and the Ark of ancient Egyptian cosmology, right? It's Atzilut, it's Beriah, and it's Yetzirah of the Kabbalistic cosmology. They also represent the points of conjunction within the human physical architecture, the 3 bands, the Muladhara band, the Manipura Anahata connecting band, and the band connecting the Anahata through to the Visuddhi. So these 3 points in the body, they're called locks, band. And it's quite important for understanding the esoteric side of yoga, for the control of vital essence and prana running through your system. Hyper use in pranayama and kundalini yoga, especially the Muladhara band is used, which is your perineum, to stimulate the activation of kundalini, for example. So it's how a man can prevent himself from ejaculating if he wants to prevent himself from ejaculating. That's how he uses that band. So yeah, when we're looking at this other structure, right, what we have is no concentration of form, because it goes from 5 round to 4, and then it comes back and it undoes what was done again. And it builds it up and it unbuilds, and it builds it up and it unbuilds. I want you to see that. I want you to understand what we're talking about. Let me show you with the cursor. So here we go from 5 to 8, 8 to 2, 2 to 4. Now it unbuilds 4 to 1, 1 to 7, 7 to 5. Now it builds 5 to 7, 7 to 1, 7 to 4. Now it unbuilds 4 to 2, 2 to 8, and so it builds up and it builds down. It builds up. There is no collection. In order for the collection to happen, you need to have a spinning element. And that's what you get when you use unicursal form. So the unicursal form would be put the pen down on 5 and just keep drawing and never lift the pen up. Now you cannot do this. You can create this hexagram, but it does not represent the forces of harmony, which is really important. And we will get to what the representation of harmony is. And in order to bring the 3, the 6, and the 9 in, you need to lift your finger and start a new program. So you are literally doing 2 different actions. There is no continuity and there's no unification. When we're looking at this other symbol, which represents the actual enneagrams, right? Whether we're looking at the one on the right or the one on the left, what we are seeing here effectively is a balance between the beginning and the end, showing that the beginning becomes the end, becomes the beginning, and that there's a continual flow, and that it can rotate, that it's got stability, that it's got continuity. What it shows is that your focus and your intention is unbroken. It's not like the other one, even the one in the center, that 3 triangles. I have to break my intention. I have to put my finger on 6, 9, and 3 to 6 again. Then I need to break the intention. Put it on 4, 1, and 7 to 4, and break the intention. Then put it on 5, 8, and 2, and 5, and break the intention. Those are 3 separate breaks of intention. There's 3 separate things happening. There's no unity. There's no unification. With the other, we are showing that all 9 elements are in a state of unity, and that they're all working with continuity towards a single point. That means that single point that they are working to becomes the origin, right? And that means you have accounted for antimatter and negative space. The divine feminine has been represented. Now, when we are looking at this image in the center, which is not an enneagram, it does not represent the divine feminine. The divine feminine has not been given a place. Here, this is pure materialism. There is no divine feminine possible within the structure. It cannot be done because the elements are not dancing around a center. And I want to also point out that for the divine feminine to have a place, there has to be harmony. And so the fact that all 9 lines are equal length and that they are in direct proportion with each other shows that not one of the 9 spheres is taking precedence. These represent 9 spheres. Each of those numerations represents a different sphere. And these lines dancing around the sphere represents relationships between those 9 spheres. And that there are 18 different fundamental relationships between the 9 spheres. Then there are also 3 supernal relationships. And those 3 supernal relationships rule the 18 fundamental relationships, which gives us 21 relationships. And these 21 relationships are happening in a sphere. And that sphere, which is the circle, becomes the reckoning of the earth, which is the 22nd element. So we have the 22 major arcana represented here. If you wonder where the earth is, the world, think again. Imagine that this is a tube and you are looking through a tube. And on the circumference of this tube is the earth, right? And what you're looking through are the forces that connect to the other dimensional planes, the other elements, the other spheres of being, the 9 worlds that they were talking about in many traditions, or the 9 spheres of the Sufis, or the 9 sephirot that are beyond earth of the Kabbalah. So we have a very abstract system of reckoning here, which is open to interpretation, and that's really important. With the traditional tree of life diagram, we don't have that. The interpretation has been fixed. Opinions have been crystallized. Structure has been set. It's set in stone. So, important point: intention. The chief cornerstone squared. Yeah, man. The foundation, exactly. Being grounded in the foundation is the key, and the number 9 represents foundation. So the Enneagram is like Vincent points out, this is the mysteries of Yesod. And the mysteries of Yesod represent the structure and the unity of the universe in its foundations. So we are here studying the foundations of the universe. This is a way to understand Yesod in its most perfect way. And Yesod is the foundation of all things around us. So this you could think of as like a deep dive into the powers of Yesod. I mean, at some point I will do the pentagram in such a way, and the hexagram, and the septagram and the octagram. And when we look at each, we will be looking at each of the spheres on the tree of life. But each of the spheres on the tree of life represents the connections with all of the other spheres on the tree of life. That's also really important to recognize and realize, right? It is only within Yesod that we have the full compliancy, where all of the spheres come together. The only sphere that is not contained within Yesod is the sphere of the earth. And that's the sphere that connects Malkut. And that's the sphere that we often relate to the world. And so the world becomes the expression of Yesod. This is why you'll see that that particular archetype is not contained within Yesod, but it circumvents, it surrounds, circumscribes Yesod, if you will. And this is why we've accounted for it in such a fashion. So without getting too deep into the Kabbalistic cosmology and cosmogony here, just looking at the geometry of why the other Enneagram is a poor Enneagram. So we've established that there's a lack of continuity and that the will becomes broken when you draw this structure. That means your concentration is not building. That means your meditation is not building. That means that your energy is flowing and then stuck, flowing and then stuck, flowing and stuck, right? That's quite important to recognize, because you have to stop what you're doing. It's like a dance. You can't start a dance and then just pause and stop and then carry on a dance. That's not how dancing works. Dancing means being in the rhythm and you're being carried. Namaste, Howard. How are you doing? Big love. Hope you're well, man. Welcome to the zone. So if you're in a dance, you've got to keep flowing with the dance. The moment you stop dancing, it's a very abstract concept, because now in order to start dancing again, you got to once again embrace the rhythm. And we're not in a state of rhythm when we are emotionless. And so when we look at just exactly how this is represented, and this is rather key, probably the best way to understand this would be to understand the Enneagram itself, right? So let's take a little deep dive into the particular forces of the Enneagram. Okay, so there we go. So here we have the Enneagram. And here we can take a look at it from a perspective of understanding the principles. So the principle of the builder is number 4. And number 4 represents crystallization. It represents being stuck. In the Taoist system, in the Chinese system, it also represents not being alive. It represents death. This is why the Chinese see the number 4 as a very unlucky number. It also represents knowledge. Why do you think the Masons and the ancient Egyptians were so obsessed with the number 4? Because 4 represents the structures of knowledge. So the structures of knowledge are very powerful, and there's analysis and logical thinking can uncover certain fundamental proverbial truths. However, it's not alive. It requires Mercury. It requires the motion of number 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 leads to crystallization, leads to being stuck. When 4 crosses the threshold to 5, it gets reinvigorated by the movement of Mercury. This is why number 5 is at the center of the Saturn square and the Saturn cube, as you guys know, right? The Saturn sigil, the number square of Saturn, 5 is at the center. And once that movement has been generated, it requires the harmony of 6. The harmony of 6 causes the knowledge and structures and crystals of number 4 to find the expressions through beauty that the movement of 5 has installed within the system. And this then leads to number 7. And 7 then represents you could say it represents the eternal in a sense, because this is where the octave is found, and the octave cycles of repetition. And so 7 is related to our deep past, related to the South Node, related to Neptune, related to understanding those deep unconscious forces that are keeping us bound in these cycles. And it relates to deep soul searching, going within, understanding. What that other Enneagram system says, number 4, individuation. No, individuation's got nothing to do with the number 4. Individuation is the scope of the mystic. Individuation is self-knowledge. It's going within yourself and understanding your emotional body, understanding your feelings, going deep, deep, deep into yourself to get a grasp of who you are, and in that process become individuated. And that then leads us to the number 8, which is the perfect expression of 4, but dynamic. So the dynamic expression of 4 is when 4 has been tempered by the harmony of 6, and in order to channel the movement of 5 that keeps the crystals moving, so that the movement can be towards individuation. And that individuation gives the persona a place to live within and aligns the persona with the ego. And this then brings us to a state of perfection. And that perfection then moves from 7 to 8, right? And 8 then is obsessed with this perfection goal. 8 wants to perfect their career. They want to be the best. They want to do the best that they can. They want to achieve success, very focused on making things better, create the better empire, create a better business, create a better model. At Saturn's 8 is hard work towards that perfection model. And that perfectionism then moves us towards activism, number 9. And so the cycle, then 9 completes the cycle and it dives across the divide. And the divide is the center. So 9 becomes 1. 9 becomes 1. And in the process of 9 becoming 1, it has to dive across the center. And across the center, it gathers on its back the emblem of nothingness, which is a circle. And then it comes reborn as a 1, carrying the emblem of nothingness on its back as it has dived across the emblem of nothing. And so we have a 1 and a 0 to represent this process. We call it 10. And then 10 carries over to become 20, right? Because that 10, the 1 with the 0 on its back, evolves to 2 and it passes the 0 to 2. And 20 evolves to 3 and passes the 0 to 3. And so forth until it gets back to 90. And then 90 finds its completion and it dives in across the center, which is where the plow is towing the circle of the stars, center of the galaxy, towing it across, represented in the microcosm as the forces of Pluto, the plow toe, which has no number. There's no numerological number associated with Pluto, but all the other planets do have numbers. The reason why is because it doesn't associate with a number. It associates with the divine feminine as an expression of those raw energy currents that are unformed. Hence, it brings changes and great big, restructuring elements. It's like a superpowered version of Mars. You could think of Pluto, right? Shares a lot of relationships with the power of Mars. So this 9 is the closest you get to the feminine. It's the closest you get to nothingness, to 0, no number. And 0 isn't a number. Don't want us to think of 0 as a number. 0 is no number. It represents nothingness. It's just a 0, which is a placeholder where you can keep nothing within. And so this then emerges from the void once again, carrying a second 0 on its back as it's now done 2 trips. And it emerges as a 1 with the 2 zeros. And it's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. And so it goes. And you notice, what do you notice in this process? Acceleration. It goes from 1 to 9 to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, to 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, to 10,000, to 100,000s, to millions, to 10 millions, to 20 millions, right? I mean, to 100 millions, to billions, to 10 billions, to 100 billions, to trillions, right? To 10 trillions, to 100 trillions, to, gazillions. What do you call like 1,000 trillions? So the acceleration is implied here. And this is why it's so important that you transcribe anything within a circle, because a circle is a magical container. It's the proverbial chalice, it's the proverbial cup. If you're doing a ritual and you want to raise a cone of power and energy for a particular cause, you need to cast a circle. Why do you cast a circle? Why do witches need to cast circles when they're practicing witchcraft? Why do magicians need to cast a magician circle? Even the sorcerers need circles. Why do the druids need to go into a circle clove of trees or a circle of stone circles? What's all this obsession with circles? Because the circle is a container. And when you understand these 9 principles, you're able to raise the energy, as we've just spoken about, exponentially, from the ones to the hundreds to the millions to the billions and trillions and gazillions, starting with 1 to tens to hundreds. Very quickly you build it with a small amount of energy into a massive charge of energy that you can then use to achieve a goal, be that magic or whatever. So there's a compounding potential of energy that's represented when one traverses the circle and when one has not broken one's intention. That is the key, because what carries all that energy in a magical ritual? I want to ask you this. Think about this for a moment. What's carrying all that energy around that you generate with your circle, right? Namaste, Orange. No, this is not Jewish. The Kabbalah is not Jewish. The Jews just used the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is ancient. It might not have been called the Kabbalah. These principles are the same principles from the Chaldean mysteries, the ancient Egyptian mysteries, the mysteries even from Sumer. We had the great tree of life, and they had this the spheres and the sephirot in the Arabic tradition, in the Qibla, which is, listen to the word, Qibla, Kabbalah. And we are told that Western Hermetic Kabbalah came from Jewish Kabbalah. I'm sorry, but that's a psyop. Hermetic Kabbalah came from Hermes. God, why do you think it's called Hermetic Kabbalah? Right? This is the knowledge of ancient Egypt. But the same knowledge of ancient Egypt. Think about when Moses, right, left Egypt. Let's just stop for a moment. What does the Old Testament and the Torah say about this? Right? So Moses was trained. Who trained Moses? The Temple of Ra. Right? He was taken in by the family of the Pharaoh. He was used ritualistically in a manger and floated down the Nile as a baby, accepted by the daughter of the Pharaoh and claimed as a son. This was typical for children with supernatural potential gifts, and they would be taken in to the family of the Pharaoh, right? And by the way, Orange, you are on the phone set. If you go to my channel, you'll see there's another, you're missing the other conversation, just so you know. Namaste, Sean. Good to see you here, dear brother. I hope you're well. I'm glad you're loving it. I'm glad. Blessed be. Namaste, Tom Roo. Lovely to see you here. Namaste, Freya. Welcome. Happy to have you here. I hope you guys are enjoying the day. So Moses was trained in Egyptian magic. I want you guys to digest this. I'm not making this up. This is in the Torah. This is in the Old Testament, right? So where did Moses get his sacred knowledge from? He got it from the priestly castes of the pharaohs, right? So the knowledge that the Kabbalah is teaching us is the remnants of the knowledge that Moses had taught to his students, I'm guessing. But it comes from that ancient root of ancient Egypt. And in ancient Egypt, it was Tahuti that taught this knowledge. What did the Greeks call Tahuti? Hermes. That's why it's called Hermetics, right? That's why we call it Hermetic Kabbalah. The Golden Dawn will have us believe that they invented this, that the Hermetic students sculpted together the Kabbalah. I'm sorry. They didn't just take the Kabbalah and fit the Tarot into it. The Kabbalah emerged from the Tarot. In fact, the tarot is the expression of the Kabbalah. Why do you think that the major arcana and the minor arcana fit so perfectly into the system? Why? Why do you think? Do you think it's an accident? Look at the major arcana there in front of you, right? There's a reason for this. This is the deepest, purest, most theoretical form of Kabbalah you're ever going to find because it holds no form. It's pure principles, and the principles are bound in a circle. And it's just principles that represent the sacred continuity of harmony as three forms coming together. And these three forms coming together in the center produce three polygons. And these three polygons merge. And the merging of these three polygons produce 9 potentials. And the 9 potentials have a positive and a negative potential each. Yang and yin. And so we have the yang, the yin, the yang, the yin, the yang, the yin. And there we have the full scope of the major arcana. And all of this is within the sphere of the world. The world card represents this whole process, represents the encapsulating force. So that actual circle that we're looking at, the circle around, that is the world. That's why the world, look at the tarot card of the world in the Rider-Waite's picture. What is she doing? She is dancing. What is she dancing? She's dancing around a circle of 9. She's dancing in circles around the 9. The world is dancing around the 9 principles. So that sphere, that is a hollow tube that you're looking down, that is the world. And but when we open up that sphere, we see it's hollow inside. And then we see that there are 2 different ways in which that sphere is arranged: masculine principles and feminine principles. And so we see those 18 elements. And that those 18 elements are reflections of 3 fundamental principles. And that those 3 fundamental principles compound into 9 principles. And those 9 principles have the ability to receive and the ability to give. Masculine and feminine, each one of them. So this is how we can see the major arcana is expressed in the Kabbalah. But what they've done is they've psyopsed the whole story. And they've turned it into some children's fantasy story about how the Kabbalah is the Jewish domain. The Jews, who are very fastidious and they looked after the knowledge of the Kabbalah, respect to them where it's due. Respect where it's due, right? They looked after the Kabbalah. They kept it safe. However, it's much older than Judaism. It's much older than Hermetics. This is a very, very, very ancient knowledge. In fact, Chaldea has this knowledge of the spheres, of the Sephirot. They might not be called that because these names are more modern names. Yes, the ideas and the concepts and the principles are very ancient. The particular names that have been given to them change with time. Water today is called water. What was water called before? It was called Vatura. What was Vatura called before? Probably called Wajet. Probably at some point it was called Waya. So the word for water has transcribed itself and changed, but it's still the same thing. We're talking about water. Water isn't new. Oh, well, the word for water was invented in the 1700s. Before the 1700s, there was no water. No, there was water before then. We just changed the word. This is what we're looking at when we understand how the Kabbalah has come to be. So without getting lost in the Kabbalah, just looking at these fundamental principles, we can then see when we approach this system, right? There is none of this continuity, right? So the will is broken, so the will cannot gather the energy. The will loses the energy every time it stops. If you practice meditation, you will know every time you stop focusing, you lose that momentum. You have to go back and focus. You get to a certain point, and something will disturb you, you lose that energy, you have to go back and focus. And it's continual training until you get to hold that presence for longer and longer and longer and longer and longer until not much breaks your concentration. That's dhyana, that's meditation. So meditation is really what we're talking about. So when you use this symbol, what you're doing is you're breaking your own will. You're weakening your will. If you cast this in a magic circle, you are weakening your will and you are more likely to have challenges with negative entities than if you were using a proper system. A proper system, like, for example, one that represents harmony and one that represents continuity and one that represents you not having to break that point of concentration. So the continuity of will, not breaking the flow of the will, is first point with the unicursal geometric forms and stars. The second point is the harmony. The harmony is really important because the harmony reflects the fundamental structure of the world around us. The world is in a state of harmony, and because the world is in a state of harmony, it continues. So there's a continuity. And that continuity is what is bound in the harmony of these forms. That has got to do with symmetry. The lack of symmetry that we see here in this other form means that there is a fundamental disharmony at work here, right? So that disharmony means that it cannot be moving, because the harmony is. I want you to understand what harmony means. Let's really delve into harmony for a second, right? Imagine harmony. Harmony means that everything is different, but something about everything that's different is the same. And that something that's the same about all these different things gives us a sense of harmony. We call that word harmony, right? And what this means is that there is a way in to each thing that's different and separate. So it means the prana, or the chi, or the pneuma, the life force, right, can flow into one form, and the same way it flowed into that form, it can flow into the next form. And the same way that it flowed into that form, it can flow into the next form. And the same way that it flowed in, and it can flow in because of the symmetry, right? Because it's got a, and then when it gets to the lack of symmetry, the prana goes bang. Oh, I got blocked. What blocked me? Lack of symmetry. So symmetry represents the flow of force of prana. When you have an asymmetrical form, like this ridiculous thing, then you do not have the flow of prana through the system. And we know that we do not have the flow of prana through the system because this thing cannot rotate, right? If you rotate it, it's different. It loses its continuity. It will be lopsided, right? And so it won't be able to spin smoothly because the forces, the vectors, are not grounded and balanced. And the harmony of the vectors means that the vectors all cancel each other out. And when the vectors all cancel each other out, it means that there's an equity within the center. And there's an opening into the divine feminine. There's an opening into the vastness of cosmic space through which prana and life force can flow through the system. This thing lacks that. So when you say there's a lack of symmetry, you say that there's a lack of harmony, you say that there's a lack of a way in for the prana to flow through the system. It means the system is dead. The system is crystallized. It cannot move. It cannot evolve. It cannot change. It is the structure of number 4. So 4 is the builder, right? The north node. It's stuck focusing on the future. It just wants to create the future. That's all it wants to do. It lacks the continuity of the present and the past, right? Where number 7 wants to hold the past. So number 7, wanting to hold the past, can get lost on the inner planes of unmanifest. Number 4 can get lost in the physical plane of materiality. You can become overtly materialistic and have a dogmatic perception of materialism. Number 4. Number 7, you can become so ethereal and abstract that you're ungrounded and you don't have your feet in the real world. Where 7 and 4 meet, that's power. Where 7 and 4 meet, that's power. Master number 11. Power. Power number 11. right? September 11, 9/11. What are they trying to tell us here, right? What magic were they casting on that day using those numbers? So when we are looking at the number 4 that represents to the Taoist, to the Chinese mind, death, it is unmoved by the number 5. So effectively, what we're seeing when we're looking at this structure, right, is the embodiment of death. And the embodiment of death means life cannot flow. So when you use this structure, you are limiting your life force. What that means is you're not allowing new life force to flow in. You are exerting the life force that you've stored in your body to flatten your own batteries. So yeah, you could use this for a magic, but you're going to be draining your own electrical potential from your cells. That will age you and that'll make you weak. That'll also affect your consciousness and your mind and have all sorts of a host of negative effects. However, even just contemplating this structure, what does that mean? So what if I'm just using it for meditation, right? So you meditating on this, it's going to imprint itself on your energy body. And the sacred geometry has a powerful way of imprinting itself on our energy bodies. In the same way that you can imprint your thoughts onto water and crystallize that in a freezer so that the water carries the imprints of your thoughts, that water gets restructured. This symbol is going to restructure your energy body with the fundamental nature of what it represents: death, decay, crystallization. It doesn't represent life. There is no place for life in this structure. It's lopsided, it's broken, it's awkward. Awkwardness is what it represents. But it does represent dogmatism. Back to number 4. Remember we spoke about how this relates to number 4. So it represents the dogmatism of number 4. When we look at the dogmatism of number 4, what do we see? Right? And this gets very interesting. Look at the relationship between number 4, right? Look at the relationship between number 4 and number 2, judgment, right? Look at the relationship between number 4 and number 6, the chariot, right? That's the feminine aspects of 4. Look on the other side. The relationship between number 4 and number 9 is Scorpio, death. That's transformation. The Scorpio is 9 forcing itself onto 4. So 4 is a result of what's been transformed. And look how it moves Emperor between 4 and 8. So 4 wants to exert itself upon 8. It wants to be controlling. So it has a lot of knowledge, but it wants to push that knowledge and force it down. So the idea of a religious institution, right, you could say relates to the number 4 rather well. Religious institutions, effectively. And that's quite important for us to grasp, right? So 4 holds its own essence. And when we look at the positioning of 4, once again, right, we can also see that it stands in that point between 3 and 5. What does that mean, right? What does it mean for it to stand between 3 and 5, right? 3 and 5, when you add them together, is number 8, right? And the 4 added to itself is number 8. And 4 directly across enforces itself upon number 8. So it wants to manifest knowledge, but it lacks the communication and the energizing movement of Mercury, which is the ever-present mover. That prime mover is manifesting in the world from number 1 to 5, right? Number 1 to 5 is manifesting. So to understand just exactly how this works is really quite something to wrap your head around, right? 5 is being manifested. Look here, the wheel, right? Do you think there's an accident why the wheel fits into the relationship between 1 and 5? because the wheel is turning. That's where the 5 gets its power of movement from. It's that movement of the wheel. The turning of the wheel hinges upon 5. And what does 5 express? So it gets its power from the wheel of movement. It expresses the high priestess that goes towards completion. So it's a highly initiatory state of consciousness. It will initiate conversations. It will initiate new ideas. It will initiate the potential for new thoughts out of the box. Mercury. So this is why Mercury is so fundamentally important. What do we got here? Probably separates the connectivity to the flow of energy to and from the various layers of creation, or it's binding to an artificial matrix that plays off of that separation. Namaste, Ignacia. Welcome. Welcome. So looking at the corresponding value systems, 369 versus 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, is that it? Separates out the two systems. Rather than 369 or governing elements, but in isolating them. Yes, that's a really good way of conceptualizing it. There's a system of isolation of the other numerations. And that's completely, and when you add up the 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 4 is 7, plus 5 is 12, plus 7 is 19, plus 8 is 27, what do we have? 27 is like really a powerful fundamental number, because 27 is 1/4 of 108. So to map out the astral plane, 108 elements, 27 is 1/4 of the way there. But 27 is also fundamentally interesting because it's 3 cycles of 9, right? Or 9 cycles of 3. So it implies the potential for expansion of the continuity of the final product. But this is bound by 369 rather than empowered by 369. And that's a really good observation or way of putting it, or what you're doing when you're using these two polygon forms separately. There's an unconscious suggestion upon your energy body that this is happening. So those 3 elements of the triangle are working against you and not with you, where the truth is they ought to be a part of the continuity of flow. Everything should be a part of the continuity of flow. Here, within the 2 enneagrams that are the yang and the yin, you see the 3 polygon form of the 3 triangles, right? The yellow triangle, the red triangle, and the blue triangle. And you see them spinning around the center, spinning, spinning. So you have a wheel spinning within a wheel within a wheel. That's what you've got. And the wheel within a wheel produces acceleration, because this is what you get. When you spin a wheel inside a bigger wheel, you get acceleration. That's the easiest way to generate. That's like the principles of how we can generate more power, right? This is how fulcrums work, right? You have a fulcrum to turn a bigger thing, right? You have a smaller thing turning a bigger thing. It's how gears work. It's how we drive a car, for example. So, Tomru, what? 3 cycles of 9 or 9 cycles of 3, true forward or backward, rock solid, truths are like that, true backward and forward. Exactly. You know, that is how the fundamental structure works. It works 2 ways. And that's why we've got 2 enneagrams, the masculine and the feminine expressions of the numerations, right? And when I say masculine and feminine, I don't mean the divine feminine and the divine masculine. I mean the ability to give and the ability to receive, the ability to move forwards and the ability to move backwards, the ability to move to the left or the ability to move to the right. And you need to have that represented, because that is an expression of the continuity that is moving through symmetry. And that symmetry is represented by these 2 different potentials. So getting back to the travesty of what they call an enneagram, which is actually 2 different polygons superimposed over each other. I cannot repeat this enough. Do not call that an enneagram. What happens when you call that an enneagram? You are imprinting with words onto your unconscious neuro-linguistic programming. And the neuro-linguistic programming that you're imprinting into yourself is this. How many of you have read 1984? What is it that he's supposed to repeat in the film, in the book 1984? I've got the audio book. It feels like a film. It's that scary, man. I did share it in my channel, by the way. But in 1984, what is he supposed to say? I forget. 1984, he is supposed to accept what lie about numbers to be released. So this is how neurolinguistic programming works to dumb you down, and how to, he's supposed to accept that 2 + 2 = 5 in George Orwell's book, right? So if you can convince someone that 2 + 2 = 5, and you can make them believe that 2 + 2 = 5, you have power over them. This is how illusion magic works. This is why the powers that be want us to believe lies. They want us to believe that democracy represents true equity of choice. That democracy represents us being able to choose who rules us. But we know that they choose who gets to run, right? They get to choose who we vote for. And then they get to affect our minds with lots and lots of advertising campaigns and release nasty information about the ones they don't want us to vote for in order to manipulate us to vote for the ones that they want us to vote for, right? So when you think about it, where is the free choice? Where is the democracy? There is no such thing as true democracy. But they've got us using the word democracy as if it involves us having free will and free power. When we use that word, we undermine our own personal power. Why? Because we are using the word incorrectly. When we're using the word democracy, it doesn't mean what we think it means. Not in the way that it's being used. When we use the word to describe this Enneagram, we are using a false fiction, a false narrative. So when they get us to believe a false fiction and to use a word, the vibrations of that word affects our consciousness. So we are programming our mind to believe that the Enneagram is just dead matter. This forces your unconscious to accept the principles of materialism. It undermines an understanding and an intuitive realization that there is panpsychism and that animism exists. And in order to embrace animism and panpsychism, we need to transcend materialism. And in order to transcend materialism, we need to have a continuity of understanding with the Enneagram that represents the principles of harmony, that represents the principles that are eternal. Why eternal? Well, the acceleration, you see, that we experience when we go round and round and round and round and round the circle means that it never ends. Instead of, like this one, the cycle going from left around the circle to the right and then coming back right around the circle to the left and going back left around the circle to the right and right around the circle to the left in a funny pattern, we have a continual circle that goes only in one direction, right? It moves only around the circle. Either way, you can move leftwards and continue endlessly moving leftwards through the left-hand spiral, or you can move endlessly towards the right, but you don't go left, right, left to the left, left to the right. That idea of construction means that you build something and it gets unbuilt. You build something and it gets unbuilt. You build something. This way you build and you build and you build and you build and you build endlessly. Or you unbuild and you unbuild and you unbuild and you unbuild. We have the principles of yoga and tantra expressed here. We have the principles of invocation and evocation expressed here, right? The invocative potential is on the left with the 20-degree angles, right? The evocative reality is on the right. Notice what we see with the evocative potentials, right? We see the tower, we see the moon, right? We see temperance, we see justice, right? We see the hermit, we see the chariot, we see the hierophant, we see the empress, and we see the magician. And when we look on the other side, we see the star, right? And the star is quite an interesting one because it sort of gives us quite an insight. We see strength balancing that pillar of the star. Then we see the sun. Then we see the wheel, right? And then we see the high priestess, right? And then we see transformation and death. And then we see the emperor. And so you'll see that these particular alignments of forces represent more active potentials, right? Look at the ones on the right. The moon, the tower, these are much more they're working deep unconscious forces, right? Deep unconscious forces. The magician is channeling these deep unconscious forces. Instead of the magician, the high priestess is bringing what was unconscious into the awareness, initiating you consciously. So you can consciously partake of the process, invoke, where the other one is going to bring the forces through you, the raw potential. So we have evocational circle on the right and an invocational circle on the left, for example. And we have the confluence of the three principles in the center. So to understand how this works is to understand exactly why, why we need to be fully mindful of the geometric shapes that we have in use. Because if you like one shape and you use it and you draw it and you use it for contemplation and meditation, then that's what you're going to be tuning into. So if you start using the Enneagram on the right-hand side, which is the green one, it's going to bring evocational forces to boot. You'll start becoming highly evocative. That could be good, it could be bad, right? You could become highly evocative. You could be suddenly being really turned on. It's very tantric. It might not be appropriate, right? If you're using the Enneagram on the left, you could become a little bit controlling. You could become very clear and structured with what you want, right? So you've got the star, you've got the devil, right? That devil is the element of control, Saturn's control. You've got the sun, right? You've got the principle of transformation of Scorpio, right? Driving you. You've got strength. Strength is a major pivot between 2 and 6. Major pivot. Major pivot. So when you look at how these forces operate, you can understand the yang and the yin of the construction. And you see masculine cycle as the timeline overseen by Saturn. Yeah, well, that's Saturn is a gatekeeper of masculine force. But Saturn has feminine and masculine. For example, Aquarius is Saturn's feminine side. It doesn't look very feminine, but that's Saturn's feminine side. Where Capricorn is very much Saturn's masculine side, just like with Mars. Aries is very much Mars's masculine side, but Mars's feminine side is Scorpio. And the sun only has a masculine side. It's a little bit lopsided. The moon only has a feminine side from this particular timeline where we are now. When that inverts happens, and this has got to do with the precision of the equinox, the long cycles that we're moving through in the 25,000 some odd centuries of movement around the wheel, the solar disk, if you will, traversing the cycles. There are shifts of polarity where the feminine and the masculine principles will switch. So there will be a time when Saturn will be the gatekeeper for feminine. There will be a time when the moon will be a gatekeeper for masculine. There will be a time when the sun will be a gatekeeper for feminine. And there have been times in the ancient past when the sun was a gatekeeper for feminine and the moon was for masculine. But now, in this time where we are, the moon is a gatekeeper for the feminine and the sun for masculine. However, these two represent the head and the tail, of the zodiac. This is why all the Egyptians built their structures in alignment with the sign of Leo and Cancer, right? Leo is the head of the serpent, Cancer is the tail, and that's the Ouroboros. And so Leo and Cancer fit into each other as the beginning and ending of the head and the tail. And the other 5 fingers, 5 planets, represent the other 10 signs, as in like 5 and 5, right? 10. And those 2 hands of 5 and 5 each represent the 10 polarities that we see as the other 10 signs. That's excluding Cancer and Leo. And like Mercury, masculine element is very much Gemini, but Mercury's feminine side is Virgo, right? Sagittarius masculine side is obviously Sagittarius. Jupiter's masculine side is Sagittarius, and Jupiter's feminine side is Pisces. Pisces, the fish. So we see how the structure of 12 is coming from a structure of 5, right? And that the 5 are really the 5 fingers that are expressed in the hexagram. The hexagram is spinning around the sun. So there again, we have quite an interesting concept that relates to the fundamental principles of the yang and the yin, of the masculine and the feminine forms, right? And it's not a true hexagram, what we call the hexagram. It's actually 2 polygons that are in union, one polygon triangle and another polygon triangle moving in 2 different directions, and they are bound around the power of the sun. So the solar disk, the circle with the point in it, represents the point of binding that binds these 2 principles. So we can see this is how the prana, the life force, flows through the system. But I diverge here, cycles within cycles within cycles. Nature demonstrates this all over the place. Mother Nature repeats. Yeah. And I like that you mentioned the repeats. The repetition is another important part of this process. This does not represent this repetition, because repetition represents that compounding interest that we were talking about, going from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to millions. This goes forward and backward. And it rubs out what it gains. Instead of building on top of what was, building on top of what was, building on top of what was, continually building on top of what was, you end up with a massive amount of silt to build on. And it's building on top of the ruins of what was before, which is what we see when we look at the ancient world. So what else is there? There was more that I wanted to point out with regards of the thing, of the false structure. So when we look at the Icazos, what I like to call the fake Enneagram, right? We can see the motion that's lacking, we've mentioned. The lack of presence, right? Of the symmetry, a lack of symmetry. And the lack of symmetry is the lack of presence, which means that there's no perfection to the construction. There's no continuity, right? And we can also see that the forces are in conflict when we look at that other. Now, the idea of bridging duality, and I think that's like quite an important point, right? We don't have the bridging of duality possible here. And let me show you what I mean by the bridging of duality, right? The bridging of duality, I mean, when we look at either Enneagram, the left or the right, what we have is one endless line that represents all these different lines that are all exactly the same length. There's only 2 ways to draw an Enneagram. And if I say to you, all you got to do is draw 9 equal lines. The lines have got to be equal length, and the first point has got to end. The ending of the 9th point of the 9th line must end on the first point, and they must be transcribed around a circle. If I give you that information, you can only draw one of these two enneagrams, left or right. It's only one way or the other way to do it. Mathematically, there are only two ways of doing that, because the mathematics of making 9 equal length lines move around a circle so that each line touches the circle on 2 points, and that the 9th point is able to flow with continuity into the next sequence, and continue going round and round and round and round and round. So either the 9th point that you draw, right? So if you start with 9 and you start with 1, and you go round, 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 the 9th point you're going to end up with is going to be on 1, whichever way you do it. There's only two ways of doing it. And the length of the lines will be different, and the angles will be different. Either you will have the 20-degree angle or the 100-degree angle. And that in itself is something quite interesting to consider, the numerations of 20 or 100, right? And that gives you quite an insight, quite a powerful way of looking and understanding how these structures work. And here's an interesting point. From one perspective, the Enneagram on the right is feminine. From another perspective, the Enneagram on the left is feminine. And that's quite interesting. This is how symmetry works, right? Like, if you look at a human being and you say, I have a masculine energy, a masculine physical body, right? So what does that say about my etheric body? Well, in order for my etheric body to be masculine, that physical energy must be able to insert itself within my etheric body, which means my etheric body must be feminine, right? And so that's quite interesting, right? And that means that the cycle flows endlessly, right? And then for my etheric body to insert itself or be inserted with my astral body means that my astral body must be masculine so that it can insert itself through the etheric body, right? So I want you to consider what that means, right? So my astral body must be expressive. My etheric body must be impressive. My physical body must be expressive. For a woman, the woman's physical body may be feminine, female body. But because the woman's female body is feminine, the etheric body of the woman must be masculine, because it must be able to insert itself into the woman's female body. Because the woman's female body is receptive. That means the woman's etheric body must be expressive. And if the woman's etheric body is expressive, then it must be able to express itself into her astral body, which makes her astral body receptive. So the astral body of the woman is in alignment with the physical body of the woman. The astral body of the man is in alignment with the astral body of the man. And so that's like an expression of Ida and Pingala and Yang and Yin, how it works. So even though I'm masculine, from some perspectives, I'm feminine, more feminine than a woman. And so from some perspectives, a woman's more masculine than a man, if viewed from the etheric field. If viewed from the astral field, I'm much more masculine. And so that's quite an interesting perspective to hold. And by the way, because we have a masculine astral body and a masculine physical body, we have 2 masculine nodes and 1 feminine node, the etheric nodes. With the woman having an astral feminine node and a physical feminine node, the etheric body is their 1 masculine node. That's why we perceive the woman as being more feminine than masculine, That's why men are more masculine than feminine, because we're 2 parts male and 1 part female. Women are 2 parts female, 1 part male. And this is like one of those like endless deep mysteries. But to understand this is to give us an insight into the nature of masculine and feminine. What it is on the surface is one thing, but if you look at it from another plane of existence, it becomes something quite different. Are you the only living paradox, Tomry? To put it simply, paradox is a part of life. Some of us embody paradox consciously. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. SPL jar. And so these principles, you're not going to find these principles embodied here, because this is just an experiment of materialism. And so here's the element. If you're using this as a glyph to understand yourself and to understand the world, you're going to end up unconsciously developing a materialistic philosophy, whether you realize it or not, right? And that's quite interesting. If you use the glyph on the left, right? If you use the glyph on the left, you're probably going to end up with a materialistic philosophy. Yeah. If you use the glyph on the right, you're probably going to end up with a Luciferian philosophy, what Steiner would call Luciferian. In other words, so off into the spiritual planes that you might be disconnected from the physical planes. That's why we need both yang and yin. That's why we need balance. The balance of these two principles puts us into a place where we can appreciate the non-physical realm of being, but also rooted deeply within the physical realm of being, having that polarity. This is why the women need to have that masculine element added to them, right? This is why the man needs to add the feminine element to them. So when the man inserts his masculine ding dong ding a ding ding dong dong ding a ding dang dang into the girl, he goes like, woohoo, hats off, cowboys, man, woohoo, like, ropes above the head and like jingling-a-ling, jing-a-ling, jing-a-ling, cowboy music and like, drumming and all of that. Then the man is able to resolve the fact that he's got two masculine nodes and one feminine node, and he finds that other feminine node in the woman to complement his second feminine node, bringing an equity, right? So that there's two feminine nodes facing each other and two masculine nodes facing each other, the cross. And when the woman gets the like that ding-a-ling dang dang ding-a-ling dong dong ding-a-ling dang ding dong dong inserted into her bing bong, then she gets the supplement of the masculine force to represent the and for the woman it's not like that. It's like la 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 la. It's more like that, right? For the man it's like ding 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 ding, like cowboy songs and drumming and stuff. And for the woman it's like it's a ballad and it's classical, it's beautiful, it's sensuous, it's spiritual. The women are more in tune with that spiritual hierarchy. The men are more in tune with the physicality around us. That's why our bodies are physically stronger. Our bodies are more capable of physical heavy lifting weights and physical fighting and all that kind of stuff, because we're more physicalized. The woman's body represents more of the harmony, more of the beauty. That's why men look at women and they go like tongue hanging out of the mouth, and it's like they can't think straight, right? Because they're drawn to that spiritual internalization that the women have as a domain. That's why the woman carries the womb. And it's like I was having this conversation with my girlfriend and her young adult, and I was explaining how all the woman is just a man with a womb. Instead of balls, the woman's got a womb. A woman's got testicles. She's got balls, but her balls are in the inside. They just look a little different, but they're very similar. She's got her 2 eggs on the inside. The man's got his 2 eggs on the outside. The man's got a tube pointing outside of himself, like a cannon, tube cannon. The woman's got her cannon tube pointing inwards. And she's got a womb. That's the only difference between a man and a woman, right? If you look at the architecture. So this is why we say a womb man, like, what differentiates a man from a woman is the womb. And okay, her balls are a little bit different to his balls. They're on the inside, right? And her tube is hollow pointing inwards and his tube is hollow pointing outwards. But otherwise they fit into each other like synchronous, That's the point. Yeah, a womb man. Namaste, Elizabeth. How are you doing? Big love and big welcome. So that's what differentiates a woman from a man, is her ability to bring through from the negative planes of existence a new soul. That means she has a gate through that womb into the cosmic. And so the man has this endless desire to get back into those cosmic gates. It's like he wants to get back home. He came here through those gates. His mission in life, he wakes up in the morning and thinks, how can I get back into those gates? How can I do it? And then he goes, well, I've seen those gates. Those gates are like, they've got knees attached to them and feet attached to them. All I've got to do is open the gates and here I go, into freedom, into heaven. And he calls the entry into those gates his heaven, right? And so he finds heaven within a woman, because within the woman he finds that sacred piece of the feminine that he's left behind back into him. And the woman, she must allow the man into her, because that sacred piece of the masculine that she's left behind, he inserts into her. So they become 2 whole beings when they're together. That becomes an expression of a polarized one whole being. So that those 2 whole beings, as an expression of one whole being, can re-imprint that one whole being into her womb as a vibrational signal that will call the corresponding vibrational being that corresponds to that one whole being into her womb. And that call will bring that being through the magnetism generated by the electricity of friction. Friction. I'm talking friction, man. That friction that everybody loves so much will produce the energy that it required to bring that soul into the body. And obviously there's a couple of important points. Exactly on earth as it is in heaven, and that will bring that new being into the earth. So this is like, I think it's an important way to understand the balance between the masculine and feminine. And you will not find that knowledge, all those ideas here, because this is a stagnant system. It doesn't allow for increase. It doesn't allow for the increase of the vibrational field of the oscillating circles that go round and round and round. And each time they go round, the will is one concrete thing. You never lift that will from the pick from the point, and that will just keeps inscribing. No, it doesn't. It goes like, it does its cycle, and then, it stops. Stops. We're gonna go 3, 6, 9. Okay, 3, 6, 9. Start again. Okay, we go around. We're building energy. We're unbuilding energy. Stop. Okay. Why? We got to build 3, 6, 9. Okay. Let's do. We've done it. Okay, let's start again. And it just does that endlessly, and it gets absolutely nowhere, right? As opposed to it just keeps going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, 200 going on, 100,000 going on, million going on, 10 million going on. And each time it builds more energy, like sex, right? The more they rub their bits together, the men and the woman, the more we get into the friction. They're talking about the diction that's causing friction. It's a little bit of constriction. The constriction around my fiction produces friction that can cause us to get into a sphere of addiction. That whole beautiful energetic experience, it builds energy, and it builds, and he becomes more aroused, and she becomes more aroused, and she becomes more aroused, arousing him, and he becomes more aroused, and the arousal builds, and it builds, and it builds, and it builds, and it builds. It gets more and more and more, and it's exponentially more until they're no longer exactly in their physical bodies. Exactly like you're saying there, it's an infinite potential, it's an infinite loop. That's what we see here. That's what this represents. Represents that infinite loop. This other thing that we're looking at here, this is two different polygons that represent death. So when we're looking at that polygon of death and we're calling it the Enneagram, what we are doing is we're using neuro-linguistic programming to bamboozle our own brains. And we're bamboozling our own brain in such a way that we are losing concept, we're losing perspective. And it's problematic in more ways than I can begin to even express here easily, right? Because the principles of living force, right? When the principles of living force are not expressed, then what happens is we connect with the eighth sphere. So this is why I'm actually saying that it's dangerous to use those other polygons for meditation or any kinds of practical magical work, because it's going to open you up to beings that are from the unalive structure. Now, this is in itself a tremendous mystery. The eighth sphere, the unalive sphere, there are beings that are trapped in a place beyond life, and they cannot access life, and they are hungry, and they are wanting to live through physical beings. We call these beings parasitic entities, and these parasitic entities all come from a single domain, right? And that domain that they come from is a domain of fixed, we can only call it death. In fact, that domain invented deaths for humans. Humans never used to, we never experienced death in cosmic time and way in the past. This was invented because humans would just merely change from one form to another and go through a metamorphosis like a butterfly, right? And allow those pieces of the body to fall off and enter into that piece of the consciousness field and move through. But at some point, we got tricked into believing that this physical reality is all there is. That's the big lie. And that lie was told to us by the king of the land of death. We call him Shaitan, we call him whatever we want to call him, right? And there's a lot of information about this field, about this sphere of activity. And this sphere of activity has access to the human kingdom, has access to our consciousness, and can influence our thoughts. So if we are using a symbol that implies death instead of life, that implies limitation as that false thing does, right? Then we are pushing our consciousness into a very limited box. And that limited box means our energy is being constricted. That means that other beings are able to insert themselves more easily into our sphere. When we are using a limitless accelerator sphere that is a compounding, infinite expression of potential that accelerates with power, then those beings are unable to touch us because we are expanding our potential and our energy and our consciousness to the point where they lack the capacity to overwhelm us because our energy bodies become too big, as opposed to our energy bodies being pushed into a little square box and being trapped in that. It's sort of like, give you an example, right? You might be a big, strong warrior, but if you get pushed into a little box and you have to stay in that little box, like crouching down for like a month, your muscles are going to go to entropy, right? And you're going to get weaker, right? That's what we see in the physical realm. So in order to be able to have strength and energy and agility, you need to have movement and flow. That means you need to have this system that embraces life, that embodies the principle of movement, that embodies the principle of will, that compounds, right? Not the unbroken line specifically. And the bridging of duality, and that's quite an important, right? So the line that is being traced, and I want you guys to consider this for a moment. Maybe this is easier to imagine. You can think of either the left or the right when we're talking of an Enneagram. Remember, the center one's not an Enneagram, to be clear. The line that is being traced, right, represents an unbroken journey that bridges the beginning to the end in the star polygon, whichever one you choose. This represents unity of action. That unity of action implies within it that it is both of physical and mundane proportions. We find the expression of the mundane in the left, embodied by the spiritual. We find the expression of the spiritual on the right, embodied by the mundane. If we can understand those two paradoxes and how those two systems work, then we can understand why they fit into each other as a yang, yin, yin, yang, yinery, yangery, yangery, yinery combination. So we do not have that synergy expressed here because there is no single line that represents this journey. So that single line represents the forces of the microcosm and the macrocosm. And it shows us that the microcosm and the macrocosm are not separate, because the beginning moving towards the ending and the ending moving towards the beginning, there's a continuity and they are the same line. It's one line that moves round the circle, and it can move through the left direction or the right direction. So this continuity is really, really important, because this shows us that the symbol is a bridge for the duality. And that compounding sense of infinite potential is bound in the presence of that line, which is one line. You put your finger down and you keep drawing. You don't lift that finger. It's one line, one line, one line. Each line is exactly equal. Each line is exactly mathematically calibrated to the next line. It's exactly 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees. And each line follows succinctly, and you find yourself where you started and you just carry on. So easy to miss your point. Oh, I was supposed to stop at 1. I'm still going on my way to 2. Very easy to transcribe and just get lost in the act of transcription, because it's meant to be that way. That's how Octave works. And so that singular line of force that represents the singular, consistent flow of energy, of intention as an expression of will, this uninterrupted function of intention represents the stability. And that stability is where the will becomes singular and it becomes aligned with an infinite potential of universal energy. So your will becomes empowered. Here, your will is being drained. It's stuck in a little box. There's no continuity. There's no symmetry. There's no singular line. It's disjointed. You start one thing, you stop. You start and you stop. That disjointedness, try and do a dance like that. Try and do a dance where you got to do this and then you got to stop. Don't just carry on the dance. Like, how are you supposed to stop? You just pause the music. Okay. Now you lose the flow of the rhythm. Now you start. Now you got to get back into the flow of the rhythm. By the time you get back into the flow of the rhythm, you stop. Have you ever had a really, really bad DJ on a dance floor? I mean, a really bad DJ where they keep stopping the music. You just, when you're getting into the flow, the music stops. Okay. Well, I don't know what happened there. Then they get the music going. Yeah, you just get into the flow of the music and the music stops. Right? And yeah, it's a stuttered waltz. It doesn't work. You need that flow. You need that continuity. You need that consistency of energy for any occult work. Now, on the psychological realms, this is also fundamentally important, because when we're meditating, we need that concentration. We need that consistency. We need that presence. We need that continual focus. And we need to be mindful that if we are focusing on a geometric glyph, that geometric glyph represents infinite, represents continuity, represents singular potential that bridges the infinite and the finite, that the macrocosm and the microcosm are bound in a point of singular movement, and that singular movement becomes an expression of the flow of prana, and that the entire system has the potential to rotate. It's got chakra, and that chakra involves the dance, involves the spinning. And as it spins, the energy builds and builds and builds until the emotional potential expands and one reaches into a new state of being. If that's not the intention, if that's not the action, if that's not the embodiment, if that's not represented by the way in which we design our worldview, we automatically prevent ourselves from being able to attain to a high level of meditation. We prevent ourselves from being able to attune deeply and maintain fixed mind. And fixed mind is a lot better than broken heart. Because when we don't have fixed mind, we get broken heart. See, because mind and heart are not separate. So fixed mind stabilizes the heart's energy. Yeah. Now, this whole story was Gurdjieff. I don't understand why Gurdjieff created this structure. If he had true occult knowledge, which I'm guessing that he did, he must be aware of all of these things that I'm talking about. He must be conscious of it. He can't be oblivious. It doesn't make sense. So it makes me sort of want to ask the question of like, well, why? Right? Why did he do this? What's the meaning behind it? What is the reasoning? Right? What is the reasoning for him doing such a thing? It makes me really wonder, and it makes me ask fundamental and important questions as to just exactly what are we dealing with, right? Why is it the way it is? I think like we need to be able to grasp. We need to be able to grasp the fundamentals and have a place in our heart to ask the questions of who are these people? And sure, Gurdjieff, I don't know if you know this, but this is the Chaldean seal that Gurdjieff got his information from, right? So he got his information from this. Why? What on earth was he thinking when he turned it into this? What was he thinking? He must understand all of these principles that we've just been outlining here. And, he's minusing the compounding sense of infinite potential, removing the singular and consistency of intention that holds the magical will, right? He's removing the potential of the bridging of duality from the equation, right? And removing the symmetry and the harmony that is represented. The eternal nature of change, something we haven't even mentioned, is not represented here. So time is outside of this picture. This is like the kind of physics that we've been crammed down our throats, which is like, well, in a vacuum, that's how these things behave. Are there any vacuums? Well, nature doesn't have a vacuum. Oh, okay. So nature doesn't. No, there are no vacuums in nature. Is space a vacuum? Well, our theories of space, which we're not going to say is or isn't true, isn't it? No, it's not a vacuum. Oh, space is not a vacuum. So where's the vacuum? We've never seen a vacuum. We're just assuming that if there might be a vacuum, this would be how the forces of nature would work. Come on, man. That like dumbass idea of materialism that has to happen in a vacuum that doesn't exist. Come on. Well, we had to create a vacuum because we needed to get rid of the ether. Why did you need to get rid of the ether? Well, it was a little bit too metaphysical for our liking. Oh, metaphysical. Why? Well, it suggests that there might be other planes of existence. We didn't want our people to be confused, thinking that nature had other planes of existence. We just wanted them to focus on the physical realm because it's easier and simpler. Oh, right. So you didn't want humans to have an access to a multidimensional sphere of potential and consciousness and recognize that they are supercharged beings that have fingers in all sorts of pots. No, 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 no. We just wanted you to think simply and just, grasp these basic ideas in a vacuum. That is the Enneagram as seen in a vacuum. That is the vacuum Enneagram. And that vacuum Enneagram sucks the living soul right out of knowledge, sucks the living energy right out of your consciousness. It doesn't do it fast. You won't realize it. You'll just notice that your creative potential will diminish the more you use a symbol like that. I don't even want to keep it on the screen for too long because I'm afraid that I'm going to infect your consciousness with that proverbial swear word. Let's put something beautiful here. Now, there's another thing. When you look at this, and I'm not just talking about the colors, right? I mean, the colors are pretty, aren't they? I chose the colors myself. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. I'm very proud of myself. I think I've done a good job with the colors here. The yellow, the red, and the blue. And then we got the green and the orange. I thought I did pretty well with this. With the color spectrum, it might not be the best. I'm sure like somebody could have probably done a better job with the color spectrum maybe, but I like what the colors represent. But if you imagine just the geometry of it, there is something beautiful about it. When you look at it, I can stare at a glyph like this for hours, and my unconscious feels comfortable looking at it because everything makes sense. Everything fits. Everything moves towards everything else in a pattern of harmonic structure that represents the equity of being. And you don't get that when you look at something like this. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time I saw this, I was a kid. And I looked at it and I was like, ooh, get it away. It's ugly. That was my reaction to it. And I'm being honest. Decades ago, maybe 3-4 decades. I don't know how long ago it was. I looked at that thing and it was ugly to me. I was like, that doesn't make sense. There's something missing. Why don't they fit together? Why is it broken? Why does those things at the bottom? Why can't they fit into each other like a perfect system? There's something disjointed. When I look at the original Chaldean seal, which is what we're looking at here, I can't claim this is mine, and I don't claim this is mine. This is the Chaldean seal. That's what it is. And it represents the 9 numerations and the relationships between the 9 numerations. Essentially, it's what we call the Kabbalah, if you really look at it, the relationships. And when I want you to point out something else. When I mapped the major arcana and the minor arcana onto this, I was contemplating for a long time how I'm going to do this. It took months. I was like, I'm not going to rush it. And I looked at it and I was like, this is a massive undertaking. And I decided, no. I'm not going to just do this. I'm going to wait. And I dropped the penny into my unconscious and I called on my guides. And my guides came and they showed me, that's the place where you're going to find it. Okay. They were, just wait there. And I waited there until part of my ancestral lineage arrived. And they laughed at me. And I was like, what do you mean? Why are you laughing at me? They said, isn't it obvious? I was like, what do you mean, isn't it obvious? Look at the Chaldean seal, they said to me. Look at the 3 polygons. Those are the 3 mother letters. I was like, holy crap. And they said, even look at the way the numbers fit, right? The 1, the 4, and the 7 represents 12, represents the potential of 2 bound by the expression of 1. That's fire. I was like, holy crap. And it breaks down to number 3. The potential of will to express itself is fire. And they said, yeah, look deeper. Look at the 2 and the 5 and the 8. It brings 15. Look at this. Look at the Saturn square. I studied the Saturn square. I was like, they're right. Water is the heart of the Saturn square. Mercury is the center of the Saturn square. That 15 is encoded all over the Saturn square, and it finds its root in number 5. And the 5 holds the secret of the 10 spheres as it fits into the 15. And I was like, wow. And the number 6 represents the harmonies. And water always strives towards harmony. It will always balance everything else, right? Water will always come back to that point of balance and harmony. That's why we have a spirit balance, right? Which is like fluids, right? When you're building, and you can see where the water is, because the water is always going to tell you what's straight and what's in harmony or disharmony. And then it showed me, it said the number, what about the element of air? I was like, ooh, the element of air. They were like, the air is the link between the water and the fire. That is the 369. The link between receptivity and expression. And that link between receptivity and expression is where magic happens. That is Yetzirah. I was like, holy crap, Yetzirah? Yeah, man. But that is Yetzirah's expression, right? Of the divine. I was like, how's that? How does that work? Right? And it just got me thinking, got me realizing, wow, look at what we have here. Look at what we have. Such a perfect expression. So when we speak of 369, we're speaking of Yetzirah and the world of formation, right? The world of formation. When we're speaking of Bariya, we're talking about the world of creation. That's the hanged man. That's the hanging on the tree. The creature, creation, right? Kriya in Sanskrit means purification. Creation is the purification, so that the formation can come into being. And then what is the fundamental, the archetypal structures? Well, the archetypal structures, those are the blocks, the fundamental blocks, right? So you've got the judgment being expressed in this system. The elements of judgment, each one in itself is an element of judgment. And judgment goes beyond information. It goes into something that's so fundamental and pure. So when you start looking at this, you start going, wow. And then they showed me, and by the way, look at the relationship between number 1 and 6. Well, Ketha and Tiferet. Yes. What is that connection? Prana. Oh, right. Yeah. Then they showed me the sun. I was like, holy crap. So the sun is the embodiment of prana that connects the fundamental monad to the sphere of harmony through which life can be expressed. That's the solar potential. And that's where the will is manifesting itself through the element of 6, the hexagram. And then it just started to fall into place. Then it showed me, look at the number 2. Look at how the number 2 and the number 7 represent this connection, right? The 2 is that the moon's potential to sublimate, to go within itself, right? And that is perfectly expressed towards 7 as an externalization factor where that unconscious movement has got a purpose. And that purpose is towards self-individuation and self-knowledge. And then what is the star? The star is that angel that is replacing the water. And the star, in Kabbalistic terminology, is a fishhook. And that fishhook is what goes deep into the water in order to bring forth the life, the hidden life, the inner life, who you are inside your hidden self of your nature. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense, that the star is a relationship between the 2nd and the 7th sphere. And when I went around, I started going, hold on. I don't even have to change anything. I don't have to move the tarot just naturally fits onto the system. without me having to adjust anything. And my ancestors were laughing at me. They were like, now you see, now you understand, now you grasp. You don't have to create the system exists because it's always existed. And I was like mind blown, because I was thinking that I was going to have to sit and meditate and try and fit each archetype to itself and find the reasoning. And it came as a field of expression, as evocation, an evocational experience in a trance. And I was shown, I was like, holy crap. And then I looked at the other one and they showed me, just look at it. And I looked and I saw with the feminine spiral, I saw what is the relationship between Saturn and the solar disk, right? Saturn's complete focus on mastery, right? And the solar disk's complete focus on expression. And then it brought the moon in there. And the moon represents Pisces. And the Pisces are two fishes swimming in two different directions. And I was like, wow. We're talking about insight. Where Saturn meets number one, that is insight. And that insight is what comes from Saturn, because Saturn brings understanding. That understanding is the currency of the moon. That deep understanding is the currency of Pisces, is the currency of those two fishes swimming in two different directions, being able to appreciate and grasp the external as well as the internal, the physical manifestation as well as the spiritual. And then I thought, well, let's continue around. Let's look at the tower. And I saw the potential of power of two, which is the great potential, which is what drawing into itself, right? The sublimative potential. And the expression of the perfect completion of number 9. 9 gives the tower to 2. It needs to. Something has got to become broken. Something has got to become emptied. And in that broken emptiness, there's a space to fill that pulls you deep into the unconscious. That's why we have sublimation. That's where empathy comes from, the tower. And through life, we learn through the hardships that we've been given and the things that we've lost and the things that have been broken for us. That is where we gain the ability to empathize. And that empathy is the baseline of what draws us deeper into ourselves. And that empathy becomes perfected when we look at number 6. Look on the other side. Look on the other side. What do you get when 2 becomes 6? You get strength. And strength, what is strength? She's subduing the lion. How is she subduing the lion? With love, empathy, compassion. I was like, it was just all falling into place. And she's working with her husband's energy, right? When 2 is meeting 6. And it is an expression that combines with the power of the sun and the life force and the prana that finds its root in 6. For 6 is the harmonies. That's why when you look at the Empress, you see her with all this nature around her. So when I started to really like look at how this system fits together, I was like, holy crap. I literally just unpack the tarot onto the system without changing anything, and it's complete. And every symbol makes total sense without me having to question. And I went and checked each one. And I was like completely flabbergasted. I'd been sitting for like 6 months to a year. No, more than 6 months. I think I'd been sitting on this for like a year and a half. For 6 months, I'd been seriously taking time to contemplate it. But for about a year and a half, I've been sitting on this. And in one moment, I was shown that all of that time was nothing. It was already done. All I had to do was just unpack the tarot and just put it onto the system. And that was when I realized this is an ancient system. The tarot comes from this. It must do. Why else does it fit so perfectly and so succinctly? And you know, when you look at the other tree of life, let me grab it for you, because it's really, really annoying, right? When you look at the tree of life, for example, let's see if I've got one here. I hope I've got one here somewhere. Yeah, I do. So when you look at the tree of life, hold on, I'm going from the wrong place. I'm trying to do it from my thing onto here, but I have to actually go from here. So let's add on. Whoops, sorry. I dropped the horrible symbol, which I think is fine. I think that's fine. I think it's totally fine because we don't need that ugly symbol. I think we've looked at it enough. I think it's done enough harm for us to have to look at. And this is another symbol that I think is harmful. I'm going to be honest. I'm only showing you the symbol so that you can gain an insight into why it's not good. So look at what they've got Aleph here. So they've got the principle of life force flowing between 1 and 2. Now, that's not strictly speaking incorrect. But when they say they've got Gimel flowing between 6 and 1, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense because it's the life force that should be shining down to 6. 6 is the thing that lights up all the other spheres. So if 6 is the one lighting up the spheres, according to this cosmology, we should have a direct line of transmission of life force, which is Aleph, connecting us, right? And you can look at many of this. Like when you look at, for example, the idea of ayin, right? So ayin here represents a relationship between 8 and 6, right? Now, I want you to consider what ayin represents, right? Ayin represents, well, it's an eye, right? It also represents the devil, right? So it represents the powers of Capricorn, okay? And I want you to see our relationship here. The devil in Capricorn is the relationship between 3 and 8. It is how contracts of Saturn inserts itself upon the forces of 3, Jupiter, expansion. How time inflicts itself upon the ability to grow, right? I want you to look at the symbol of the devil, which is a symbol that you probably all know well, which is the goat man and the two masculine and feminine, the two lovers that are the same beings as the lovers that are now chained, right? And but the chains can come off. So that represents contracts that are binding the yang yin potential and keeping it stuck, right? Which is what we see when we look at this relationship between 8 and 3. It's a much more succinct expression of meaning, right? When we look at this relationship between 8 and 6, 6 represents harmony, right? 8 represents not harmony, but the expression of the material and spiritual in a state of continuity, time. That devil card doesn't add up there. When I looked at the system in the old times, I was always like, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't. And Lamet, right? Lamet, another one, right? The relationship between Jibor and Tiferet. It doesn't add up, right? 5, they tell us that the 5 means will. I'm sorry, 5 does not mean will. 5 means free will. Oh, but isn't that what will? No. Free will versus will. Where is will? Will is number 1. 1 is the essence of will. 5 is the free will that the human has to exhibit and inflict upon the world. It's a very different thing. They will tell us it means will. So that's something quite interesting. And number four represents construction, the builder. So why is there a balance between 5 and 4? They're trying to show us here that there's a harmony between 5 and 4, which there is. But what are they trying to show us about the harmony between 5 and 4? Well, what they're trying to show us is that 5 and 4 have this relationship of yang and yin. Well, if 5 represents free will, then what should 4 represent? Being stuck? Well, crystallized, maybe. The number 4 represents crystallization, knowledge. That crystallization, this is why they'll tell you that the mazloth is Chokmah. No. Chokmah is a number 2. It's potential. It hasn't come into being. The mazloth cannot exist in number 2 because 2 doesn't have space. Oh. Well, before space can exist, you need to have form because form structures space. So form is Binah. Binah is 3. That form represents expansion. The expansion of form, which is 3, produces the space, which is 4. But the space encapsulates, encapsulizes the form. And now the form is crystallizing in space. So now you have the principle of crystallization of number 4, the builder, the space that can hold the form of 3. Oh, but I thought the mazloth, according to Kabbalistic texts, means number 2, Chokmah. No, it does not. It's how 2's principles of potential are brought into extension through the form of 3 that is embodied by the space of 4. So 4 becomes a receptacle of the mazloth, not 2. There's so much inconsistencies with the teachings you're going to get from all these so-called great books on the Kabbalah. They're just going to tear nonsense and wind rubbish around your head. This is why the Kabbalah has become so hated by so many people, because you cannot find the knowledge in books. You have to make it your own. You have to drop everything you know about it and just go back to a simple circle and take it in as simple a way that you can and understand it for yourself. Play with it. Start thinking in terms of these dynamic principles and start teaching your mind to sort of think outside of the constructions. And these esoteric truths will start to become potential, you know. But yeah, we've gone over the 2-hour mark, and I've been really excited. I get excited when I talk occult. Please forgive me. It's been my love ever since I was a child, and I spend all my days and my time working with my clients. So I work effectively 7 days a week. Yeah. But I work for myself. I work according to my own schedule. And when my clients need me, then I'm available. And even though I'm a shaman, I'm trained in various different forms of mysticism and occult therapeutics. So I've got like a background in many things, though shamanism is where I've embraced like the most fundamental recognition, going into the simple rhythm and just allowing my consciousness to expand into rhythm and just to get a sense of the spiritual actualized through experience. The fastest route is through rhythm. And but a lot of my time with my clients, I'm not able to go into these deep topics because most of my clients are not ready for this. I share little bits of insights with each of my clients as per their life, as per is relevant for their needs, so when I get an opportunity to share insight like this with a group of people like you guys that are so fully into understanding these cosmic proportions, it's like I'm a little boy again. I'm a little boy in a sweet shop. And you know what I'm going to start doing? At some point soon, I'm going to start doing I'm going to start doing what do you call it? What do you call it? Um, um, I'm going to start doing what they call, and it's going to be free, by the way. I'm not going to be charging for it, but I'm going to start doing um, webinars. I'm going to start doing webinars, and in the webinars, I'm going to go deep dive. And I'm going to, I'm not going to charge money for the webinars. I'm going to do them free, but I'm going to start with particular exercises with discussions related to the principles and the exercises, and one by one run through them with webinars. Maybe not long webinars. I'll make them short, like an hour and a half, hopefully, with a Q&A, that can be part of it for people to ask questions. Like maybe we can gather afterwards for a Q&A after people have worked with the exercise and come back and they're like, well, I experienced this. Well, what do you think? Like what's, whatever. For the more practical experience of this. So that's something that's been on my mind for a while. It's only a pleasure. It's only a pleasure. Om Namah Shiva, only a pleasure. So I'll keep you guys informed. Sometime in the next month or next 2 months, I'm probably going to be starting with the webinar program. And probably I'm going to do either 1 a week or 2 a month. I need to figure out how I'm going to do this, because at the moment I'm pouring a lot of time into YouTube, and I'm wondering, like, is it worth it? I'm putting a lot of content into YouTube, but I want to do webinars for a small group of people. And the reason for that is I don't want people that aren't interested. I don't want the energy of random people inserting their thought potential into our energy circle while we are discussing particular techniques or doing particular exercises together, as like a guided walkthrough of particular exercises. I want to have just a group of people that are interested, and not having Walker. I don't want to be doing it in front of a glass window where everybody can come and stand and stare at us through the window while we're doing what we're doing, like a bit of privacy. So that's why we're going to start doing webinars, and only the people that are interested will be there. So it'll probably be smaller groups, but that's fine. But it will be like for the people that actually want to start doing that. So, and I'm not going to be charging for it either. I'm going to have to upgrade my StreamYard to the highest plan to do that, but that's all good because I'm working pretty well, so I can facilitate that. That's something I want to do. This is my way of giving back, because I feel so lucky. The universe gives me so much. I get to do what I want to do. I get to follow my heart. I don't have to work for someone else. I get to have clients that come to me, and I get to make a living doing what I love, which is like using all of this to help clients, which to me is like that's the perfect dream. And so my life has been really lucky. Okay, I had to make sacrifices when I was young. I had to confront fears. I had to give up things. I had to go and live as an ascetic. Many chapters in my life, but and I didn't know when I did it that this was going to be a career. I thought I was just going to always not have money, not be able to earn money, and I was okay with that. Didn't want money. I just wanted knowledge. It's like, I don't care. But now I'm able to live by the beach. I'm able to earn enough to keep my animals and myself and my child and his mom. She has nowhere to live, and live by the beach and have a nice place by nature reserve. So I feel blessed. So this is how I give back. So thank you all for joining. It's been an absolute honor. It's lovely to share with you guys that are enjoying, and that the energy is flowing round like a loop between us and through us. I'm sending you all much love, big blessings, peace, honor, respect. Om Namah Shivaya. And have an absolutely awesome week. And I'll probably be live some point, maybe Friday, maybe before Friday. Just check my channel, right? My channel is, if you go into Telegram, right? If you go into Telegram and you click in Telegram this, at Bush Whisperer Speaks. So if you click at Bush Whisperer Speaks, right, then you find, if you go into Telegram and you go into the search bar and you put that at Bush Whisperer Speaks, you end up at my channel. And that way you will always know what my next live is. Gosh, I haven't spoken to my girlfriend. It's late. I'm going to have to give her a call before she goes to sleep. Otherwise, I'll miss my sweetheart. And I love to say goodnight to her before she sleeps because I love hearing her voice. So here's the link, and I'll put the link in here so that you guys can see the link. So there it is on the screen, right? So if you put https:/t.me/Bush Whisperer Speaks, you can click that and that will take you to my channel. You can even put that link on into Google search if you're on your laptop, for example, and that will take you to my thing, and then, you know, that'll give you an idea of what I'm doing at any point. So you basically will know when my webinars. That's my like first point. I do share stuff on Facebook, but I don't like Facebook. I should be starting to share stuff more prodigiously on other channels and stuff. I should actually make an effort to get this stuff out on Instagram and TikTok and all those places. It just seems like such a chore, man. I just love doing this. I don't like doing all of that technical stuff, making the stuff go everywhere. That seems like a pain. But anyway, thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for being such a lovely group of people to enjoy and share this information with. Sending you all big love, big blessings, peace, honor, respect, and Om Namah Shivaya. Blessed be.